welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. This episode is part of our Free Expression Friday series, an interview series from ABA's American Booksellers for Free Expression, celebrating the amazing work of booksellers, organizers, and book people in general, fighting for the right to read.
Laney Hawes, co-founder of the Texas Freedom to Read Project. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I'm excited.
So can you tell me a little bit about the mission of the Texas Freedom to Read Project?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like we can't quite explain our mission without telling how we all found each other and how this organization started, but just briefly. So I'm a parent. I'm a mom to 4 public ed kids here in Texas. And my kids' school district was overtaken. Ultimately, their school board was. All these special interests came in, spent all this money, and pretty much bought seats on our school board. And one of the first things that they did was start banning books, right? They created a book banning rubric as soon as they were elected. And I started to see books just be pulled off of shelves left and right. And I was angry, right? So I got involved. I was at every school board meeting and I went to Twitter and I started sharing things that were happening. And once I got there, I realized there were other parents in Texas who were up against not only the same issues, but we were literally fighting the same organizations that were secretly funding our school boards, right? And we were starting to realize that this effort to pull books off of shelves and out of libraries was coordinated and well-funded. And it wasn't grassroots. It wasn't some local movement within our districts of concerned parents. This was very well planned, very well coordinated. And so as I started to meet all these other parents, I met specifically these 2 parents, one in the Austin area and one in the Houston area. I'm in DFW, who were ultimately doing the same thing I was. And we decided, hey, these groups are coordinating, right? We're fighting the exact same beast and we're watching it pop up all over Texas in different school districts. And the new parents are fighting the same fight that we've already fought or that we're in the midst of. And we thought, we need to coordinate. We need to have a place where we can all get together and discuss this, and we can help other parents in other school districts who are just starting this exact same fight, because we have the tools, we have the resources, we know what it looks like, we know what all the arguments are, we know what books they're going to read from, we know exactly what words are going to come out of their mouths, right? And so there's no reason that the 3 of us shouldn't really create a place in Texas for all parents and citizens, really, who want to gather to fight book banning. And that's how the Texas Freedom to Read Project came about. We had seen it happen in Florida. They have a Florida Freedom to Read Project. And we actually reached out to them and said, hey, what's working there for you? How are you doing it? And can we get some ideas? And hey, would you mind if we started a Texas Freedom to Read Project? And what's interesting is it's not that there's some central location, but that's what we're calling ourselves. Ultimately, they're kind of a sister organization. We talk to them, we get ideas from them, we work together. And now we are here in Texas offering resources and support to Texans all over the state in every school district who are up against the same thing. We're teaching them how to do public information requests. We're teaching them how to speak at school board meetings. We're asking them, what do you need from us? What questions do you have? How can we help? And here we are, right? It's the same 100 books they're pulling off of shelves anyway. They're just passing their book banning lists around and going district to district. And so it's in some ways, and it's been easy because we say, okay, well, this is what's going to happen next. And then this is what's going to happen. And then somebody's going to pull this book out. And so we have, we're coordinating that response to that. But yeah, that's who we are. We're the Texas Freedom to Read Project, and we're empowering parents across the state to really fight against book banning in their local communities.
So what have been some of the major events in your organizing so far since you started?
Oh, that's a great question. So I would say, we started in December of 2023. So we're a pretty new organization, right? And one of the most exciting things for us has been how quickly organizations from around the state have recognized and seen who we are and are thrilled that we've come about. And so one of our greatest successes at this point is all of the organizations within Texas that we're now coordinating with, right? That we are now partners with. We have a group that started kind of right after us called Authors Against Book Bans. And they have a really strong Texas chapter because there are so many phenomenal Texas authors. And so we partner with them. And when we see a community, we just had something happen in a very small rural school district. They were looking at these 4 books to potentially panic about, I guess you could say. And we were made aware of it. And we called Authors Against Book Bans. We got on a phone call. We had these conversations. They wrote up an op-ed to publish in the local paper and their local Texas authors. We got involved. We started talking to people on the ground. We started getting ready to submit public information requests. And within a few days, we had this great response, and we were coordinating with people there. Also, just sending, the op-ed in the paper was beautiful from an author. So we had a success there. All 4 books were saved, which is exciting. Unfortunately, that we realized that was just the beginning in the small school district, and now we're seeing full-fledged going after far more than just 4 books. But we're already seeing the success of coordinating with our other organizations in the state. We're working with the ACLU of Texas, which has been great, and we are actually creating a free speech academy where we are going to train parents on how to speak at meetings, what to look for, how to, like I said, how to file a public information request. We're teaching them the ins and outs of the legislation that the Texas legislature is pumping out to ban books, because we've just realized so many parents out there who are busy raising families don't have the bandwidth to do all this research and fully understand it. But if we do, why not share that, right? So no, we're really excited about what's happening here in Texas.
So HB 900, as it was formerly known, the Reader Act, once it was signed into law, has been partially enjoined for now.
Yes.
Thanks in part to a lawsuit in which ABA is a co-plaintiff. But not the entire law was enjoined. Some aspects about library curation and collection development were still allowed to go into effect. So since that happened, have you seen any changes in how this is playing out in Texas schools and libraries?
Yeah, so actually one of the more devastating parts of how this is playing out in Texas schools and libraries is that when the bill was passed, when HB 900 became law, and before the courts got involved and before they enjoined it, right, before they put a halt to these book vendor ratings, a lot of school districts in the state created policies based around the book vendor ratings. So even though it's been enjoined, this is still the policy in many districts across the state of Texas. And now, because no one knows what to do and we're on hold, school districts across the state have just said, okay, well, we just can't buy library books right now. We're done. No more buying books because we don't know what's happening. So yeah, it's been absolutely devastating, because even though the law is on hold, a small portion of it, it was already being put into place. And now everybody's just said, stop. And by the way, that means stop buying books. And then we also have what we're seeing most of all, which is even more devastating, is we have librarians and superintendents. We have school boards who are so terrified of what's going to happen to them if any of these books are found in their libraries, that whether or not this law is approved, they're going to go in and preemptively pull any book that even hints of something that might make someone angry, and they're just quietly pulling them off of the shelves. It's kind of this quiet secret weeding is what we call it. There are these internal reviews, and they're trying to protect themselves. So yeah, it's devastating to see books being pulled from shelves out of just plain old fear, right? And librarians are just trying to do their jobs. And in some cases, we have librarians who are like, if I just pull these 10 books, will it prevent problems and I can save 100 books, right? Or do I stand up and say, no, I'm not going to pull any because this violates the constitutional rights of my students? And then they become a target of disgusting and terrifying harassment. So yeah, HB 900 has had devastating consequences. Another part of the law, which you had mentioned that hasn't been enjoined, is these library, development policies, right? How library collections have to be developed. And the language, even that exists, is unclear. And what was written into the law was already law. Every penal code in Texas, all of the laws explicitly state that all of these books must be looked at as a whole. You cannot reduce them to a checklist, right? So if we have a concern, is this book sexually explicit? Is it legally obscene, which would mean it cannot be on shelves? Well, a lot of people don't realize that law says that to determine whether it's obscene, you actually have to look at it in context. And if it has literary value and merit, it's not obscene. But everybody likes to leave that part out when they talk about this. And so if a book might have a sex scene in it, that doesn't make it obscene. It doesn't make it pornography. It might be a depiction of sexual assault. It might be a sex ed book. So of course it talks about sex, and somewot explicitly. And so to say that that is pornography is absurd, right? So anyway, HB 900, even though it's been enjoined, has been devastating for Texas schools. Absolutely. It's wide sweeping. We don't even yet know, right, how wide sweeping it is, especially because so much of what's being done is being done behind the scenes. And I don't fault librarians for trying to prevent, what we've seen in some of the more horrific instances where librarians are being ultimately attacked in the community, right? And people are calling for their arrest. And it is disrupting education. But it's putting them in this, what I would say is impossible situation. They can no longer do their jobs, right? I'm grateful that HB 900 was enjoined and that booksellers can still sell here. But it's the consequences are already devastating, unfortunately.
And that's just a reminder that courts alone are not the answer, right?
No.
The best and only thing that can be done to prevent this is to organize and to speak up and to stop these laws from being passed in the first place.
I would take it a step further, and that is to stop electing these people who are writing these laws, right? Yeah. I had, when this all started, and I want to share this anecdote because I know that people who watch this, it's going to be important, because you might have someone in New York or in California who's like, I don't have to worry about this. I don't live in crazy Texas, right? I had someone on Twitter say, we don't have to deal with this in Connecticut because we don't have the crazies here in Connecticut. And one of the things was, how do you keep letting this happen? Someone said that to me on Twitter. How do you keep electing these people? Well, I didn't elect them, I'll tell you that. But I tweeted back at them and I said, I have a question. Did you vote in your last school board election? And the person tweeted back at me and said, well, I didn't, but it's because I don't have to worry about it. And I said, no, you do. Everyone does. We're seeing this in like more progressive and liberal areas because so few people vote in school board elections, especially here in Texas, where a lot of ours are in May. They're not in the fall with regular elections. Our voter turnout is 10% or less. So all you need is the most extreme people in the community to vote, and they're going to win your school board. Because all of just the plain old moderate middle ground who aren't concerned and they aren't worried, they don't vote, and only extremists vote, then you're going to get an extremist board. And we like to say this is low voter turnout will always lead to elected officials that do not represent the actual community. So that's my advice is, yes, organize, but organize in terms of get out the vote, get people, educate them, and get them to vote in school board elections and these local elections, which oversee community library boards, right? And then another step, the next most important is your state legislature, right? Because here in Texas, the state legislature didn't used to try and legislate library books, right? But now they are. Now they're trying to decide what can be in my neighborhood library. So yes, organize, but more specifically, this is about voting in the unsexy elections is what I like to call them, right? To go do your research. And a lot of times these elections aren't partisan, so you don't know who's a Democrat, you don't know who's a Republican. Here in Texas, when you go to vote for school board, you don't know their political party. You actually have to do some work to find out what these candidates believe in. So yeah, organize, but man, just vote for just reasonable people. That's it, right?
So what else is going on in Texas right now and coming up this year that you think people should be aware of?
Oh, so one of the biggest things we're seeing is a massive influx of people and money from around the country who are traveling from school district to school district. They don't belong in that school district. They're being paid large sums of money to go to school board meetings and grab books and read 4 lines from a 300-page book that seems so horrific, but it's completely out of context, and to get everybody riled up. So really, it's outside influences coming into Texas and trying to rile up a small percentage of voters. And because few people vote, if they can rile up that small amount. So I would say get involved. And what's coming is these out-of-state and out-of-district interests. And my recommendation, not just to Texans, but to everyone, is to go check out what's happening at your local libraries and your local school district. Go look now. We have seen an uptick even in the last month of just all of these districts are more and more every day. And it's becoming exponential. We have 1,200 school districts in Texas, right? So say we've had 20 that have had some major problems. What we're seeing, it might turn into 40 and then 80. And it's going to be, like exponential. and they're taking the same lists of books and they're passing them around. So yeah, that's what's coming. It's coming to every district in the state is our greatest concern. A lot of people don't realize here in Texas, we only have a state legislature every other year. We only have a session every other year. We don't do it every year. So this has been a bye year. So right now we don't have a legislate. They're not in session. Starting next year, next spring in 2025 is when they're going to be back in session, which is when we are going to see more book banning legislation. We've been following Florida because of what they're passing. And so we're waiting for 2025, but we're trying to get ahead of that. But right now for the next year, it's all going to be seemingly local. We call it, I mean, you've probably heard the term AstroTurf, right? And it's a playoff of grassroots. So it's not, grassroots is pretend, that grassroots is when it's, hey, real people on the ground. AstroTurf is pretend grassroots, where they pretend to be local people, but then we find out they're actually being funded by groups from all over the country that are trying to overtake the state. So yeah, no, that's what's coming next. Is it's going to start, we believe, becoming exponentially worse before it gets any better. I just add one more thing is we just had a bunch of really important elections here, and unfortunately in Texas, they're saying $90 million was pumped into Republican primary legislative seats. We're not talking about Washington, D.C. We're talking about the state. And unfortunately, far right extremism is winning. And our state legislature in 2025 is seeming to be terrifying. We used to have just really hardworking Texans, I believe, that whether they're Republican, Democrat, a lot of them were working hard for what they believed in their communities. And because they wouldn't do what the special interests wanted, the special interests pumped their $100 million into the candidates who promised to vote for that. And it's so frustrating, but it's looking bleak.
So given all this, how can Texans get involved in the Texas Freedom to Read Project, and how can non-Texans support you?
Yeah, thank you. That's really a great question. Well, Texans, number one, we'll ask you just to join us, and you can go sign up on our website. We're on Twitter, X, I guess. We're on Instagram. We're on Threads. We're on Facebook, Texas Freedom to Read Project. You can find us there in all of those places. Go in and sign up to volunteer or to join. And then we're going to have your information. You can join us for our regular phone calls where we train parents, where we mobilize. Our goal right now is to get a parent or community member in every single school district in the state of Texas on our team. So that means we need 12. We have a lot. We already have a few thousand, but we don't currently have one person from every single school district in the state. So please, anybody who's watching, come join our organization. We will ask you on an intake form which school district you live in. And then we're going to we're going at it. We're going to keep fighting it. We're going to keep shining a light on it. And we're going to hope that people wake up and say, hey, this is too much. You really are taking away our children's constitutional rights. For those people who are outside of Texas, we actually really do appreciate the moral support. Sometimes it feels like we're alone here. So to know that other people even care is helpful. But we could use your donations, right? Our organization. And we could use amplification online. So, if you're seeing a fight in Texas and you see ways you can help amplify that message, please, we would love that on social media. You can reach out to us. But yeah, really any way you can. We will take all the help we can get. And for those out there saying, hey, what are you idiots doing in Texas? How could you let this happen? Well, we are a gerrymandered state with so much money buying these elections. And it's really turns out when you're just a parent who isn't funded by anybody and you're actually just trying to pay your own bills and raise your own children, it's hard, right? Like we watch these local school board races and we have candidates. It used to cost about $5,000 to run for school board in Texas. You're in your own little community, you buy some signs, you have a popsicle party, you knock some doors. 4 years ago, it cost $5,000 to run about. It is now over $100,000 to run for school board, unpaid volunteer position. I don't have $100,000 to give, right? Like I'm paying for soccer and car insurance for my teenage driving son, who turns out is very expensive to insure, right? I don't have $100,000 to run for school board, and nor do other regular parents, because this money isn't coming from regular parents. It's pouring in from around the country. So yeah, we'll take all the help we can get. We'll take your money. We'll take your moral support, right?
Laney Hawes, co-founder of the Texas Freedom to Read Project. Thank you so much for talking to me, and thank you for everything you and your organization are doing in Texas.
Yeah, thank you. No, we really do appreciate it. And we are not going to stop fighting for our kids and other kids here. We are in this for the long haul, right? My kids' rights really are being violated. I'm watching books be taken off of shelves all the time. And we're not going to stop. And if all we can do right now is shine a light on it, then that's what we're going to do. We're going to make a record, and we're going to let people know what's happening here.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA website at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!